Hello, everyone. It's Philburt, and I'm ready for another This Week at Work adventure.
This Week at Work is the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, featuring experts in human resources and employment law to bring you practical, timely, and accurate insights so you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, August 3rd, episode 242. Today, we have a difficult conversation with PhilMario, who's coming to us from the Missouri SHRM Conference at Lake of the Ozarks. And what would PhilMario be without his lawyer brother, LuigiBurt, an expert at keeping you from getting backed up with sewage? Get it? These two team up to make sure you are HR all-stars when it comes to preparing for and documenting difficult conversations at work. So now we step to the mic, but understand the mic is yours too. All this and more on This Week at Work.
Welcome back, everybody. We're happy to have you on This Week at Work. And to all of our new friends down in Florida, we're happy to have you joining the program. We're looking forward to seeing you later this month at your SHRM conference in the state of Florida. Today, I'm coming from Lake of the Ozarks, which is in the center of the state of Missouri, where we're having the Missouri State SHRM Conference. Burt, I got to tell you, I've been out on the event floor, and first thing I did is I ran into your friends and coworkers, Portia and Debbie, and they have a fantastic booth set up. I did a little shopping in your booth there, Burt. I don't know if you can see that, the Ogletree Deacons team representing, and there's some really good lakeside fun giveaways there. There's a little cool fan. It kind of helps keep you cool. It lights up, and it actually says, I don't know if you can see it, employers and lawyers working together. How clever. You must have thought of that yourself, Burt. There's a sunglass holder and a keychain to go with it, all in a waterproof bag, sporting Ogletree Deacons. Burt, your team's done a great job.
Thank you, Phil.
Phil, pulling out all those tchotchkes, I was thinking, are you going to break into a Carrot Top routine? I don't know if Carrot Top is playing the Ozarks, or maybe Paul Rubens. We should honor Paul Rubens a little bit. He passed away.
Oh, yeah. No, Paul Rubens. I grew up loving Pee Wee Herman. That was a lot of fun. We've all done the Pee Wee Herman dance, you know. So we've had a lot of fun. We're sporting our HR superhero shirts today. We got a Mario theme going on, obviously, as you've seen. But, Burt, I'm ready to get into Lawyer on the Clock. How about you?
That sounds great, Phil. Let's run it.
All right, Nick, let's run Lawyer on the Clock.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
It's been a couple weeks since I've been on the program because of work obligations. But one I don't want to miss is that the Senate confirmed a nominee, Kalpana Kotagal, to be one of the commissioners at the EEOC. And this is fairly significant because this marks the first time during the Biden presidency that the Democrats have a majority of the commissioner seats at the EEOC. A couple weeks ago, the Senate voted 49-47 to confirm Kotagal. She's a civil rights and employment attorney at a firm called Cohn-Milstein in Washington, D.C. And again, with her becoming the fifth commissioner at the agency, I think we are really going to see the EEOC start to get active. Thus far in the Biden presidency, it's really largely been the Department of Labor and certainly the NLRB that has been very active. The EEOC has actually been fairly quiet during the Biden presidency, but now with them having the majority at the EEOC, I think we're going to see the EEOC become very activist. And interestingly, Kotagal is her home state is West Virginia. The only Democrat to vote against her nomination was Senator Joe Manchin, and he said that ultimately
who represents West Virginia.
Yep, and he said he did not support her because the EEOC should remain as free as possible of partisan ideologies when making important decisions for America's workers and businesses. Her confirmation really marked the end of a lengthy process to establish the Democrat majority on the commission. And with a full slate of members, it will really focus on prioritizing artificial intelligence bias, and enforcement of pregnancy discrimination laws and tackle a much more liberal or progressive policy goal. And so I think people need to buckle up for this, and we'll see what happens with the EEOC moving forward.
Just what we need in the employment profession, and the challenges I know that employers face already today is more government oversight, not to take away the importance of any of these agencies and the role that they play in ensuring that we do things right, but the compliance aspect is just becoming overwhelming. And I know it's funny, as I walk through the conference halls, there's all kinds of vendors who are talking about, take a break, you need a mental break, the HR burnout level is high. We see people switching jobs, trying to find something that's more suitable for their lifestyle. And much of that has to do with the constant pounding and compliance of regulation on employers. And it just gets to where if you're a single HR person of one for an employer, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to be in compliance all the time. And for those that can do it, I'm always impressed with their abilities to navigate those high waters. There we go.
Very good segue. So let's move on to our next topic. We got just in the last day or so, the Department of Homeland Security issued new I-9 forms and rolled out a new alternative for verifying remote workers. The new I-9 form reduces sections 1 and 2 from 2 pages to a single-sided page. No previous fields were removed, but some fields were merged. Section 1, the preparer translator certification, is relocated to a separate standalone supplement A that only requires completion when necessary. Section 3, the re-verification and rehire, is moved to a separate standalone supplement B that employers need only print and complete when utilizing for re-verification an employee's work authorization or rehiring an employee with an existing I-9. It revised the list of acceptable documents page to include some acceptable receipts, as well as guidance and links to I-9 Central containing information on automatic extensions of employment authorization, documentation, and a couple of other significant changes, including that the I-9 is configured as a form fillable on tablets and mobile devices. Yes. So there's that's pretty. So
that's a good improvement right there in and of itself.
Yeah. Employers can utilize the new version for newly completed Form I-9s from August 1, 2023 moving forward, although the old form can still be used until October 31, 2023. And then very importantly, there's a new alternative that permits remote examination of I-9 documents for quote unquote qualified employers. We all know that during the COVID-19 pandemic, DHS permitted some flexibilities, temporarily permitting remote and virtual review of identity and employment eligibility documentation during the I-9 process. Even though the COVID flexibilities are phased out, DHS is implementing a permanent alternative to physical inspection of I-9 documents. The new remote inspection option is implemented by a final rule that took effect yesterday. So there are some requirements for that to become a qualified employer. I'm not going to go through all of those. The big catch is that that is only available to qualified E-Verify employers. So if you want to participate in the remote viewing and remote examination of documentation, you need to become a qualified employer, which requires that you use E-Verify.
Yeah. And nothing that requires you to go back and do anything in addition to your current employment base. This
Correct.
Is all going forward.
Yes, this is all moving forward. So another one I want to just quickly mention is that in the last week, the Americans with Disabilities Act turned 33 years old. President George H.W. Bush signed the ADA on July 26, 1990, and there are nearly 9 million individuals in the United States 18 to 64 with a disability who were employed in 2021. Those are the latest estimates from the U.S. Census Bureau. So in recognizing this, President Biden issued a proclamation for the 33rd anniversary of the ADA. And he noted that disabled Americans are still 3 times less likely to have a job and often earn less for doing the same work, and just sort of reemphasize the importance of the ADA and the significance of it.
Yeah.
Well, the last one I want to talk about real quickly, Phil, you'll love this one. I don't know if our friend Monique will like it too much, but there are a couple.
Burt, she's always listening.
I know she's not going to like this at all. There's a couple of senators out there. Senator Bob Casey from Pennsylvania, Democrat from Pennsylvania, and Brian Schatz, Democrat from Hawaii, who introduced get this one, the quote, "No Robot Bosses Act," end quote. And so what they're trying to do, other than bringing to mind sort of, some science fiction notions, this bill, if it would be passed, would essentially prohibit employers' exclusive reliance on automated decision systems, would require pre-deployment and periodic testing and validation of automated decision systems to prevent unlawful biases, would require operational training, would mandate independent human oversight before using the outputs from AI. It would require timely disclosure of use, the data inputs and outputs, and employee rights with respect to AI decisions. And it would establish a regulatory agency at the Department of Labor called the Technology and Worker Protection Division. So again, sounds kind of futuristic, almost a little dystopian, science fiction-y, but just bear in mind that Congress is working on this type of stuff to prevent really bias from infiltrating the workplace through artificial intelligence.
Yeah, no, I think that's gonna be a struggle for us all. I mean, we're surrounded by it all the time anyway, and we got to find ways. I believe my opinion is to embrace this technology and use it in a healthy, balanced way. I hope we don't end up with too much regulation that doesn't allow us to leverage the benefits that can come from it. I mean, that's all there is to say. Where this is going to go, who knows, but hopefully we get benefits from it and not just regulation from it.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's what I got for you. That's Lawyer on the Clock.
Well, Lawyer, welcome back. We're happy to have you. I did forget to get to the poll questions today, Nick. Let's go ahead and get to those poll questions. We have a couple poll questions. The first question is, what is the most difficult conversation you have had at work? We'd like to hear from you in your chat with those. There are several different selections here. Managing conflict between team members. We've all had to do that. Delivering performance improvement plans, firing and layoffs. Those are always difficult. Negotiating pay. That can be very difficult, normally, depending on how that's done when you actually talk about the formalization of negotiating, and then discussing other personal issues. Burt, you and I are going to chat a lot about some of those things, so I think they're all relevant questions. And then the second question here is, what conversation should be had at the water? What conversation shouldn't be had at the water cooler? Politics, personal health, private relationships, religion, personal finances, salary details, gossip, sensitivities, social issues. Burt, I think you will probably have something to say about those selection of items, and we'll get to that when we get into having difficult conversations and sharing some stories with you. So with that, Nick was gracious enough to let you select any that apply, not just a single selection. So thank you for that today, Nick. We appreciate it. How about we go ahead and let's roll Philburt's Forum.
You've just entered Philburt's Forum, where we peel the onion back and take a lighter look at the workplace.
What's interesting to me about difficult conversations is that we as leaders sometimes struggle with how difficult they can be and what we're going to have to do to have the proper conversations, but they're not always so considerate when they're done at the water cooler, particularly amongst our employees. So I know, Nick, you've done some research and you pulled some very real live examples of conversations at the water cooler. Let's take a look at them.
Okay, yes, these are all taken from Twitter, and these are things that were overheard at work. So sometimes
Is it Twitter or is it X?
yes.
I think it's X.
Yes.
I think it's X.
I think it's
Yeah.
whatever somebody wants to call it and use the service, I'm sure is fine for those people at the Twitter X. Quote here, "This meeting is going to be so exciting, I just don't want you to soil yourself."
Yeah, that's yeah, if you overhear that and you're in management, then it's time for you to have a difficult conversation. All right, Nick, what else you got?
All right. I typed your email address wrong. I missed out a letter. Did you get the email?
Yeah, now that might lead to a different kind of difficult conversation, one that is probably about competency and doing the job. Because no, you're not going to get the email.
I think I'll be sick next Wednesday and can't come in.
Now that is a real scenario. I've run into that several times when people have been asked to come into work. At times they don't want to come into work, and they say, "You know what? I actually think I'm going to be sick that day. I'm not sure I'm going to be here." Yeah.
But you do have to ask questions because it could be, hey, I have a procedure the day before or the evening before. Yeah.
Good point. And I've already filed my FMLA paperwork.
There you go.
All right, so let's get to the core of our program, the Employers Lounge. Burt, let's chat a little bit about difficult conversations. I know I get involved with these on several levels. One, I have to have them from time to time with my employees, not often, but I do, or my employees have to have them with their employees and I'm coaching, or our members call and say, "Hey, I have a scenario. Let me tell you a scenario," and they are asking for some help. And then we kind of coach a little bit on how to have that conversation, a little different from when I'm advising an employee because I have less insight. And whether it's my employee asking whether I'm doing the difficult conversation or a member is asking is how much or what should I document for later? And is it going to hurt me if I have more documented or is it going to help me if I have less documented? So, Burt, I'd love to just get some insight from you. If you were giving some suggestive insight to our members and your clients, what would you suggest for them with documenting when we're having difficult conversations that are not always leading or a result of discipline?
Yeah, so documentation, Phil, from my perspective as a defense counsel is absolutely key. And, the documentation should be well thought out. It shouldn't be haphazard. And what I mean by that is that typically when I have conversations with clients who have to have difficult conversations with their employees, I'll actually work with the client to draft talking points for the meeting itself. And there's a few reasons for that. If the conversation later becomes the topic of litigation, I think it's beneficial for the HR person or the in-house counsel, whomever it is, to have sort of a record of what they went into the meeting to talk about. If the former employee or the employee who's now a plaintiff several years down the road makes all these allegations about what was discussed during the meeting, you can at least have some documentation to pull out and say, no, this is what I prepared heading into the meeting, and we stuck close to these topics or these talking points. That's the front end of it. The back end of it then is really where your question is, and that's what we should document from the conversation itself afterwards. And again, I think it's really critical to document pretty much all aspects of the conversation, what was discussed, the length of the meeting, who was present, try to get the who, what, where, why, when, and how in there, and have that documentation tell your story. Draft that documentation as if it's going to be exhibit 1 in trial 2 or 3 years down the road. Obviously, people's memories are going to be much better when the event happens versus 2 and 3 years down the road, and they're going to be better than those memories that a potential plaintiff's attorney might try to impact 2 and 3 years down the road in court. And so, if you have documentation to rely upon from those difficult conversations, you will be much better served as an HR representative. And I think, again, we want to be very factual in it. trying to focus on those who, what, where, when, why, and how aspects.
Yeah, and I know in the training programs we've done together, you always come back to the, just outline on a sheet of paper, who, what, where, when, how, why, and just start filling in the blanks as it relates to your preparation, and then as it relates to the conversation. And then that always leads to, well, should I have the person sign it? Should I share it with them? Should they sign it? And I know you'll have some opinions on that. So I'd like to get those from you as well.
Yeah, as far as your internal documentation, I don't necessarily know that needs to be signed, your notes of the conversation, but if there's any sort of formal write-up that flows from the discussion, absolutely, it's best if it's signed. If it's a complaint that somebody's making, I like to try to get the complaint in the individual's writing themselves, have them write it out. Or at a minimum, if you write it out, have them sign it and say that it's true, accurate, and complete, and that they've had an opportunity to add or delete anything in the statement. So, yeah, when you're having difficult conversations, if you can get like I said, if it's a complaint, try to get it in the individual's writing. If it's not a complaint, but it's going to lead to some sort of disciplinary action, try to get a signature on that. And I have found that except in the most hostile situations where somebody absolutely positively refuses to sign, if you have that language on there that says that my signature below indicates only that I have received this document and this topic has been discussed with me, it does not mean that I agree with the contents of the writing. I have found that most people will still sign that they understand that they're signing just a receipt of it and not acknowledging that it actually happened, that they engaged in the misconduct. But that's kind of getting a little off topic and more into the discipline realm.
Yeah, I have had, I just stay in this space a little bit. I've had a scenario once, and we'll chat about it here in just a minute, where, chatting with someone about, and really not a disciplinary issue, but a personal hygiene issue. A person had body odor and looked kind of disheveled coming into work every day and really didn't meet the hygiene standard of the organization. And we didn't have a hygiene standard to refer to. It was just that people were complaining about body odor from an individual. And so we were chatting and so on. And then the person said, if you're going to have any notes on this, I would like a copy of those. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't really issuing discipline. I was trying to help the work environment from, an employee culture and fitting in. It's like, look, people are talking about how bad you stink. You don't like that. And what can we do about that? And in the end, I just said, well, I'm just going to have a simple note. I'm going to put in the file that we had the conversation, and I agreed to give it to him. But it was, that he understood that, yep, he does have body odor, and yes, that, he can do some things to improve that while he's at the workplace, not to offend other people. But one, very difficult conversation to have, not easy. And two, I was just caught off guard with, hey, if you're going to have any notes on this, I want a copy of those. And that kind of gets back into, well, if it's going in the employee file, then they do have some rights to that information.
Yeah, well, in some states there are, like Illinois, for example, Illinois employees have a right to the contents of their personnel file upon request. In Missouri, I believe in Indiana, and also in Florida, I don't believe they have those same rights like they do in Illinois. But yeah, I generally think that if you're going to put something in the employee's personnel file and they're aware of it, to me, that documentation is going to come out someday. And you should be proud to stand behind that documentation. And if an employee asks for a copy of it, I would generally give a copy of it.
Yeah. So a couple of really difficult conversations I've had, and I just want to share some tips with people as it relates to that. Where I found that the most difficult conversations come in is when we're having very personal conversations, sometimes that aren't work related. So having the personal hygiene conversation. Great employee, worked hard. People liked the individual. They just didn't want to be too close to the individual. And that I found to be, really complicated to pull the individual aside and talk to them.
Right.
There's times I know when employers have had to talk to people about the style of clothes that they wear. Maybe the clothes are offensive in one nature or another. And back in the day, if it was a female and you wanted her to, not wear such a loose fitting blouse or something like that, we would always try to have a female talk to her, or, that type of sensitivity. And that's about as far as it went from preparation. Today, I'm not sure most of us have the right handbook and policies, but it's really about how we prepare in advance to help the person deliver the message. And you kind of alluded to it in the beginning, and it is the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and preparing your notes to that. So when you get into the conversation, you're not necessarily stumbling all over what you're trying to say. And then I always suggest to people to let's practice the conversation one time through, because you do sometimes end up using words that maybe we shouldn't use, or having an insensitivity when we should have more of a sensitivity to the conversation. I don't know if you get involved in those types of work related issues of difficulty or not, but in those things, I'm really saying be specific, be clear, be sensitive. Have your notes prepared, the who, what, when, why, where, and how. Prepare in advance and practice it. Capture notes while you're having the conversation, and then follow up with the individual, particularly if it's a sensitivity issue like, body odor or loose fitting clothes. I've had to share with people about illnesses or deaths of family members, and that's really difficult. So these types of things, you never know when you're in that HR seat, what you're going to have to share and when. So there's no real one way to prepare, but that who, what, when, why, how, practice, prepare, share, follow up. Great tips to have when you're dealing with those types of sensitivity issues. Anything else you would add to any of that, Burt?
Yeah, so Phil, get ready for this. You've heard it, you're hearing it here first on This Week at Work. I am a big fan of PCP, okay? PCP, and I'm not talking about, phencyclidine, the drug. I'm talking about sort of praise, counseling, praise.
Yes.
And when you're having difficult conversations with people, and I think this,
some people just refer it, Burt, as the sandwich.
Exactly. So, we're PCP, and that, I'm a big fan of, you start out the meeting with something positive, you get to the meat of the issue, what the conversation's really about, and then you try to end on a positive note as well. Sometimes I'll call it positive counseling, positive, or praise counseling, praise, something like that. And that's right. It's like a sandwich, and you try to put the negative in between, a couple of positive pieces. Doesn't always work. You don't always have the opportunity to do that. When someone's coming into your office to have a difficult conversation with you, you're sort of being caught off guard. And so you may not have the opportunity to formulate something like that. But if you're the one going out and having that difficult conversation with somebody, just in the example you gave of the individual who had the body odor, you can walk out there, have the conversation, and start out with, hey, I want to talk to you about something serious. I want you to know you're a good employee, you produce quality work, but there is an issue that's causing problems in the workplace. You then address it, and then you end with that. Let's figure out how we could remedy this together so that you remain a great, productive employee who continues to produce that quality work, and try to end on that positive note.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important part of it, and particularly ending with, look, people really like the individual. They just didn't want to sit next to him at the lunch table, and they didn't want to work next to him on the production line due to the body odor. And obviously, before it ever came to my attention, they want to know, they're like, maybe it's a health issue, maybe there's all kinds of reasonings that it could be, and it really just came out to be the fact when you broke it down. The guy actually was working out before he came to work, but not showering. And by 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it caught up with him. And he goes, I was hoping nobody noticed, but and he corrected the problem right away. But it was very
little overripe by 1 p.m., huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a ripe banana by then. That's for sure. But it, those are really but you have to prepare. you have to praise. I think you have to do all those things that we were talking about. But in the end, you do have to give very clear, precise feedback to the individual. And I think that's an important piece on that.
Agree, Phil. And you get to that meat of the conversation where you're counseling, and there's positive counseling and negative counseling. It's counseling. And the one thing I would say is, to people is try not to be too passive aggressive when you get to that counseling piece. You want to be direct, like Phil, you just said. You want to be very clear, very precise about what the issue is. And passive aggressiveness leads to some ambiguity. And I have found that people would rather have a clear understanding of what the expectation is moving forward, rather than some passive aggressive, imprecise remedy to the problem.
Yeah, the other thing I have found is for our listeners is pay attention to those young leaders and managers we have, and when they're having those conversations, because we still know statistically most leaders, managers, supervisors have not had any formal training or development in this space. And you can go a long way by going out, and I would like to say go out and put your arm around them and give them some advice, but that wouldn't be PC today. But you want to go out and give them, look after them, give them the advice, let them practice it. They'll be very thankful for it. Even for those who appear to be most confident doesn't always give a good conversation from that standpoint. And I tell you what, I love being out here. It's a lot of great. I don't know if you can hear the thunder in the background, but I'm starting to get rained on. Here comes the rain. So we're going to have to wrap this show up for today. Burt, thanks. I'm happy to have you back. I hope everyone has joined us from around the Midwest and our new members down in Florida. We're happy to have you listening to the program, coming to you live from Lake of the Ozarks. We'll see you back here next week at 7:30 Central Time. Bye-bye.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.